Poems, your key to better English. Introduction. Learning a new language can feel like a difficult game with many small, confusing parts. You might spend a lot of time trying to remember words or understand hard rules. It can feel like a lot of work, and you might ask yourself if you were really getting better. What if there was a way to learn English that was not only easier, but also more fun and helpful? What if the best way to truly understand English was not in boring books, but in the beautiful, strong world of poems? This book has a simple but strong idea. Studying poems, with their special language and big ideas, is a good and fun way to get much better at English. We think poems are not just for special times or for people who study books. They are like a box full of words, waiting for you to open it and find its treasures. We call this way of learning poetic language learning. It means learning English can be made better and more exciting by studying poems. Poems use special language tricks, like poetic devices and figurative language, and often talk about big, important thoughts. By looking closely at these poems, from old ones to new ones, people can learn new words, understand how sentences are made, and feel more sure of themselves when using English. This way of learning feels less like work and more like exploring. Why are poems so good for learning English? Think of poets like skilled builders of words. They don't just put words together, they shape them, color them with words, and make them sound beautiful. They use clever tricks called poetic devices and figurative language. For example, a poet might say the world is a stage. This is like saying the world is a place where people act out their lives. Or they might say someone is brave as a lion, which means they are as strong and brave as a lion. When you read these lines, you learn new words and see how they can be used in creative ways. This helps you understand English better, find new words to use, and even write more interesting sentences yourself. Poems also share big, important ideas about life, love, nature, and everything in between. When you read a poem about feeling sad, you don't just learn the word sad, you understand what sadness can feel like. This helps you see things from different points of view and makes your own way of explaining things richer. Poets often put a lot of meaning into just a few words, which teaches you to look carefully at every word and group of words. This makes you a more careful and thoughtful reader of all kinds of English. In this book, we will go on a journey through poems from long ago and from today. We will look at specific poems, explain the special language tricks they use, and explore the deep ideas they share. Most importantly, we will show you how to use what you learn to improve your English skills. By the end of this book, you will not only like poetry more, but will also be much better at English. Learning will be a fun discovery, not a hard task. You have the power to speak English better inside you, and poetry is the way to unlock it. So let's turn the page and start our exploration of poetic language learning. Get ready to see English in a whole new way. Your journey to speaking English more easily, with more feeling, and with more confidence starts now. 1. Learning English with poems. There is a wonderful secret for learning English. It is hidden in plain sight, waiting in poems. You might think poems are only for special times or for people who already know English well. But I have learned, after many years of looking at words and stories, that poems are one of the best and most fun ways to learn and get better at English. It is like finding a secret key that opens doors to understanding language in a way that books sometimes do not. We call this learning English with poems. It means using poems not just to read or enjoy, but as a way to actively build your English skills. Poems use language in special, sometimes surprising ways. They have their own kind of magic. When we look closely at this magic, We see it teaches us a lot about English words, how sentences are put together, and even how to share our thoughts and feelings more clearly. It makes learning feel less like work and more like an exciting journey. Think about it. When you read a poem, you see more than just words on a page. You feel things, see pictures in your mind, and hear a special rhythm. This helps the language stay with you. It is like learning a song versus learning a list of facts. The song stays with you, right? Poems do the same for language. They wrap new words and ideas in feelings and pictures, making them easier to remember and use. Let's start by looking at the basic parts of poetic language. Poems are full of things we call poetic tools and word pictures. These might sound like difficult names, but they are really just ways poets use words in creative ways. One of the most common poetic tools is a metaphor. A metaphor is when you describe one thing as if it were another thing to show how they are alike. For example, a poet might say, "The world is a stage." Now, the world is not really a stage where actors perform. But saying it is a stage helps us understand something important about the world. It suggests that life is like a play, with different roles we all act out. When you first learn the word stage, you might think of a place where people sing or act. But by seeing it used in a metaphor like the world's a stage, you begin to understand its deeper meaning. You see how language can be used to compare things that are not literally the same, but share qualities. This skill of understanding and using comparisons is very useful in English. It helps you understand ideas that are not physical, like love is a battlefield, or express difficult feelings. It teaches you to think beyond the simple, everyday meaning of words and to see the richer, more colorful ways language can be used. This kind of understanding is a big step in feeling more sure of yourself with English. Another similar tool is a simile. A simile uses the words like or as to make a comparison. For example, her smile was as bright as the sun. We know her smile is not really the sun, but the simile tells us her smile was very, very bright and warm. Learning to spot similes and metaphors in poems helps you understand not just what the words mean, but what the poet wants you to feel and imagine. It is like learning a secret code that makes language stronger. Then there is personification, where a poet gives human qualities to things that are not human. Imagine a poem saying, "The wind whispered secrets through the trees." The wind cannot really whisper or have secrets. But this personification makes the wind seem alive and mysterious. It creates a clear picture in your mind and adds a feeling to the scene. When you see these, you learn that English is not just about facts. It is also about creating feelings and pictures. These poetic tools are like tools in a box. When you see them used in a poem, you are learning how to use these tools yourself. You start to understand that you do not always have to say things in the most direct way. You can use comparisons, give life to objects, and paint pictures with words. This makes your own English, whether you are writing or speaking, much more interesting and effective. Besides these specific tools, poems are also great for growing your word collection. Sometimes, poets use words that are a little old-fashioned or words that are common, but used in a very special, emotional way. When you find a word in a poem, you do not just look it up in a dictionary. You see it used in a situation that is full of feeling and meaning. Let me tell you a short story. When I was younger, I found the word alas difficult. It sounded so dramatic and old-fashioned. I would see it in books and just skip over it, or think, what is this strange word? Then, I read a poem that started with a line like, "Alas, the day is done and shadows fall." Suddenly, alas was not just a word, it was a feeling. It meant sadness, regret, a sigh of disappointment. The poem's mood, The pictures of the day ending and shadows growing all works together to show me exactly what alas meant, not just its definition, but its emotional weight. This made the word stick in my mind forever. I could then use it myself, perhaps to show a gentle disappointment, and my English felt richer for it. This is the power of context. Poems provide a very rich context. They do not just give you a word. They give you a word surrounded by feelings, pictures, and ideas. This helps you understand the small differences in meaning, the connotations of a word. For example, the word home can mean just a building where you live. But in a poem, home might mean warmth, safety, love, or a deep wish to belong. By reading these different uses, you learn that words have layers. You learn to choose the right word for the exact feeling you want to express, which is a sign of truly advanced English. Poetry also helps us with the structure of English, with grammar and sentences. Poets often play with the rules. They might change the order of words in a sentence, or use very short sentences, or very long ones, all for a reason. Think about this. In everyday English, we usually say, "I walked to the store." That is a standard sentence. But a poet might write, "To the store, I walked." Why do they do that? They are changing the order to put a special focus on where they walked. Or they might write, "walked to the store." These short, quick sentences can create a feeling of being in a hurry, like someone is rushing or is very determined. By looking closely at these planned changes, you begin to see that English grammar is not a set of strict rules you can never break. It is a flexible system that can be bent and shaped to create different effects. You learn that changing the word order can change the meaning or the feeling of a sentence. You start to understand how poets use punctuation, or even not using it, to control the speed and flow of their writing. This makes you a more creative and confident writer yourself. You will not just follow the usual patterns. You will understand when and how to play with them to make your own English stronger. This practice of looking closely at how poems are made also sharpens your overall understanding and thinking skills. Understanding a poem often means looking for deeper meanings, searching for main ideas, and figuring out what the poet is trying to say beyond the exact words. This is a fantastic workout for your brain. When you read a poem about, for instance, time passing, or the feeling of being alone, you have to think. You have to connect the pictures, the words, and the feelings. You have to ask yourself, what is the poet really trying to tell me? This process of figuring out meaning, of looking for layers, is exactly what you need to do when you read any difficult text in English, whether it is a news article, a story, or even a hard email. Let me show you with an example from my own learning. I remember reading a poem that talked about a river of tears. My first thought was that is just a sad poem, but as I thought more and looked at the other words around it, words about loss, about emptiness, about a long journey, I realized the river of tears was not just about crying. It was about a deep, overwhelming sadness that felt like it flowed on forever like a river. It was about the length and depth of grief. This kind of thinking, this searching for the deeper meaning, trained my mind to look for more than just the surface in everything I read. It made me a better listener and a better reader. It made me feel comfortable with the idea that language often means more than what it literally says. So, when you engage with poetry, you are doing more than just reading words. You are developing your critical thinking skills. You are learning to understand, to analyze, and to grasp complex ideas. These are very important skills for mastering any language, and poetry provides a unique and interesting way to practice them. The emotional impact of poetry is also a huge part of why it is so good for learning language. Standard methods might present a word like joyful. You learn its definition, maybe you see it in a simple sentence. But in a poem, you might read about a joyful heart that sang like a bird in spring. The picture of a singing bird in spring, combined with the idea of a heart, makes joyful come alive. You feel the joy. You can see it and hear it. This emotional connection makes the word much more memorable. You do not just know what joyful means, you understand what it feels like. This deeper connection helps you use the word more naturally and confidently in your own English. In a similar way, when you find a sentence structure in a poem that seems unusual, but it creates a strong effect, you remember it. If a poet uses a specific sentence structure to build suspense or to create a sense of wonder, that structure becomes linked to that feeling. Later, when you want to create suspense or wonder in your own writing or speaking, you might remember that poetic example and try to use a similar structure. It is like learning by experiencing the effect rather than just memorizing a rule. In short, learning English with poems is about experiencing English in its most lively and expressive form. It is about understanding that language is not just a tool for sharing information, but also a tool for creating art, for bringing out emotion, and for exploring the deep parts of human life. By studying poems, we learn to appreciate the beauty of English, and by doing so, we naturally get better at using it. The poems become our guides, showing us new paths, new words, and new ways to express ourselves. We have seen how poems, with their special language tools like metaphors and similes, help us understand words better and use them more creatively. We have explored how they make our word collection bigger by showing us words in rich, emotional situations, and how they teach us about grammar and sentence structure by showing us how poets play with language for effect. And we have touched upon how the emotional power of poetry makes new language stick with us in a way that dry explanations often cannot. By actively using these poetic tools, we have seen how poems become more than just beautiful words. They turn into active classrooms for mastering English. Now, let's explore some specific types of poems that are especially good for this kind of language learning. 2. Studying poetry for language skills. Poetry can seem like it's only for quiet times, for enjoying beauty or deep feelings. And it is. But have you ever thought of it as a sort of English practice place? That's exactly what it can be. When you read a poem, you're not just reading words. You're entering a space where language is used with great care and for a reason. Every word is picked out, every line break is important, and every picture is drawn with skill. This carefulness is what makes poetry a wonderful place for us to get better at English. Think about it. In everyday talk, we often use words fast, sometimes saying the same thing again or not picking the very best word. But in a poem, one word can mean a lot, carrying many ideas. When you find a word in a poem, especially one you don't know, the lines around it become your guide. The poet has made a small world for that word to live in, showing you its color, its shape, its feeling. This is much stronger than just looking up a word in a book and forgetting it later. For example, imagine a poem uses the word gleam. If you just look it up, you might learn it means shine. But in a poem, it might gleam on a drop of water, or in a hopeful eye, or on a far-off star. Suddenly, gleam isn't just a word for shining, it's a feeling, a picture, a whole mood. This is poetic language learning at work, learning words not alone, but as living parts of a story or a feeling. This careful use of language also applies to how sentences are put together. Poets often change the order of words. We are used to saying, "The dog barked loudly," but a poet might write, "Loudly the dog barked," or even "barked the dog, loudly." At first, this might feel a bit odd, like walking on a path that's not quite straight. But by noticing these changes, we start to see how flexible English can be. We learn that the usual way of putting words together is just one way, and that changing the order can create different effects, perhaps making the bark seem more sudden or more exciting. This helps us understand grammar and sentence building not as strict rules, but as tools that writers use to create specific feelings. It's like learning that you can use a hammer to build a house, but you can also use it to gently tap a nail into place. Both are uses of the hammer, just like different sentence structures are different uses of English. Beyond single words and sentence shapes, poems are full of what we call poetic tools. You might have heard of things like metaphors and similes. These are like secret ways poets make their language more interesting and share big ideas in small spaces. A simile is when you compare two different things using like or as. For example, her smile was like sunshine. This tells you her smile was bright, warm, and made people feel happy. A metaphor is similar, but it says one thing is another thing without using like or as. So, her smile was sunshine. This is even stronger. It means her smile didn't just seem like sunshine, it was sunshine and how it made people feel. Learning to find these tools is like getting a superpower for understanding English. When you read a poem and see, "The city is a sleeping giant," you know the poet isn't saying the city is really a giant. They are using a metaphor to tell you the city is big, powerful, and maybe quiet and still for now like a sleeping giant. This skill isn't just for poetry. You'll find metaphors and similes everywhere, in news stories, in ads, in talks. Understanding them means you can grasp difficult ideas more easily. If a news report says, "The economy is on shaky ground," you know it's not really shaking. It's a metaphor telling you the economy is not steady and could fall. This deeper understanding is a key part of poetic language learning, showing how artful language can lead to clearer thinking. Poetry also makes us think more deeply. When a poet describes a sad feeling, they might not just say, "I am sad." They might say, "A heavy cloak of sorrow fell upon me." This picture of a heavy cloak makes the sadness feel real, something you can almost touch and feel its weight. To understand this, you have to ask yourself, why a cloak? Why heavy? What does that tell me about the kind of sadness the poet feels? Is it a sadness they show to others? Is it a burden that makes them feel weighed down? This kind of questioning is the core of thinking carefully. It's not just about knowing what words mean. It's about exploring the why behind the words. This thinking skill you build with poetry helps you in other parts of your English learning too. When you read an essay or a chapter in a book, you often find difficult ideas. The ability to ask, why did the writer choose to explain it this way? Or what is the main message they are trying to share through these specific examples? Comes directly from practicing with poems. You learn to look past what's on the surface, to see the links, and to understand what the writer means. It's like becoming a language detective, putting clues together to find the deeper meaning. The way poems are built can also help improve your reading and how smoothly you read. Poems often use shorter lines, and they don't always follow the normal sentence patterns we see in regular writing. They might have sentences that go on for many lines or short, strong lines that stand alone. When you read poetry often, your brain gets used to these changes. You become better at reading in different ways. You learn to stop at the end of a line, even if the sentence isn't finished, and then to understand the meaning when the sentence continues on the next line. This makes your reading smoother and helps you understand different writing styles more easily. It's like learning to dance to different beats. You become more graceful and comfortable with more kinds of music. Let me tell you about my friend Anya. Anya was learning English and she was quite shy about speaking. She understood a lot, but putting sentences together felt like a puzzle she couldn't solve. One day, she found a poem by a young writer about the feeling of being new in a city. The poem used simple words, but it had lines like, "The buildings tall, like giants stand, watching me walk in this new land." Anya read this many times. She loved how tall and stand were together and how the buildings were compared to giants. She felt the watching me walk. It made her feel less alone in her own shyness. For Anya, this poem wasn't just pretty words. The short lines made her feel like she could keep up. The comparison to giants helped her understand the feeling of being small in a big place. She started trying to write her own short lines about her day. She'd say, "My book, heavy. My bag, full." It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. The poem gave her a model, a way to break down her thoughts into small, easy parts, just like the poet had done. She told me, "It was like the poem gave me permission to speak in small pieces first, until I felt brave enough to make them bigger." This is a beautiful example of poetic language learning, using the structure and feeling of poetry to build confidence and fluency. So, you see, studying poetry is much more than just an academic task. It's a lively, active way to connect with the English language. It's a place where words are treasures to be found, where sentences are made with art, and where complex ideas are made clear through strong pictures. By reading poems, we are not just enjoying art, we are actively making our minds sharper, growing our word knowledge, and becoming more sure and able speakers of English. It changes learning from a hard job into an exciting trip, a journey of discovery where every poem is a new map to a deeper understanding of English. Now that we have looked at the main ways poetry helps us get better at language, from words and grammar to understanding and thinking, we have a good start. We have seen how the careful choices poets make, the tools they use, and the way their verses are built can all help us learn English better and with more joy. The next step is to take these ideas and turn them into real, useful actions. We will now look at specific ways and examples that will show you how to start this exciting journey turning these ideas into concrete steps that will improve your English language skills. 3. Using poetic devices and figurative language. Poetry is a special kind of English. It uses words in ways that can surprise you, and that's where the magic is. Poets are like artists with words. They don't just say things plainly. They find clever ways to paint pictures with words, to make you feel things, and to show you new ideas. These clever ways are called poetic tools and picture words. Think of them as the special tools in a poet's box. Learning to understand these tools is like getting a secret key to unlock deeper meaning in poems and to make your own English much better and more interesting. Let's start with what these terms mean. Poetic tools are the ways poets make their poems sound good or create a certain feeling. Things like rhyme, where words sound alike at the end of lines, or rhythm, the beat of the poem, are poetic tools. They help make a poem easy to remember and musical. But picture words are a little different. They are when words are used in a way that doesn't mean their exact dictionary meaning. Instead, they are used to create a comparison, an image, or a feeling. It's like speaking in pictures and feelings, not just plain facts. Why do poets use these tricks instead of just saying things plainly? Because picture words can do so much more. They can help us understand big, hard ideas or feelings that are hard to explain with simple words. They can make us see something in a new way. Imagine a poet wants to talk about how sad someone is. They could just say he was very sad. That's clear, but it doesn't make you feel the sadness. But if the poet says, his heart was a heavy stone in his chest, you can almost feel the weight of that sadness. The words heavy stone aren't really true, but they create a strong picture of deep, crushing sadness. This is a metaphor, one of the most common types of picture words. Metaphors are a great example. A metaphor says one thing is another thing, even though it's not really true. It's a way to say something is like something else, but even stronger. For example, if a poem says, "The world is a stage," it doesn't mean people are really actors walking on a wooden floor. It means life has parts, like a play, where people have roles and things happen in parts. By calling the world a stage, the poet helps us think about life in a new way, perhaps about how we all play different parts or how events happen like a story. This helps us understand the word world and the idea of stage better. Similes are very much like metaphors, but they use the words like or as to make the comparison. So instead of his heart was a heavy stone, a simile would be, his heart felt like a heavy stone. Or she was as brave as a lion. Similes are often a bit easier for beginners because the like or as clearly shows that a comparison is being made. But both metaphors and similes help us understand hard ideas by connecting them to something we already know. When you read a poem and find a simile like, "Her laughter was like music," you learn not just about the person's laughter, but you also connect it to the nice, beautiful feeling of music. This connection is what makes learning language through poetry so strong. You're not just learning a definition, you're experiencing how words create feeling and meaning. Another wonderful type of picture words is personification. This is when poets give human qualities or actions to things that are not human, like animals, objects, or even ideas. Think about a poem saying, "The wind whispered secrets through the trees." Wind can't really whisper, and it certainly doesn't have secrets. But by saying it whispered, the poet makes the wind seem alive and mysterious. It creates a feeling of quiet closeness, as if nature is sharing something special. This makes the poem more interesting and helps you understand the mood the poet wants to create. It also teaches you that words can be used in unexpected ways. You might start to notice how we use personification in everyday English too, like when we say the car coughed or the computer is stubborn. Understanding these kinds of picture words directly helps you build your word knowledge and your sense of small differences in meaning in English. When you see a metaphor like "her smile was sunshine," you learn that sunshine can mean more than just light from the sun. It can mean warmth, happiness, and brightness. So, the next time you want to describe someone's happy smile, you might think of sunshine and say, "Her smile was like sunshine," or even more like a poem, "Her smile was sunshine breaking through clouds." This isn't just adding a new word, it's adding a new way to use words, a new shade of meaning. Learning poetry language shows you that English is not a fixed set of rules, but something alive that can be shaped and changed to say almost anything you can imagine. Let's think about a specific example. Imagine reading a poem about a hard time and the poet writes, "Hope was a tiny bird, singing in the storm." This is a beautiful metaphor. A storm is messy, loud, and scary. A tiny bird is small and delicate, but the bird is still singing. What does this tell us? It tells us that even in the worst situations, there can be a small, lasting feeling of hope. The bird's song is small, but it's there, a sign that things might get better. The poet didn't just say there was still some hope. They used a clear picture, a tiny bird singing in a storm, to share that idea. By understanding this metaphor, you learn that hope can be shown by something small and fragile, yet very strong. This helps you understand the word hope better and how it can exist even when things seem impossible. You also learn how to use images to show feelings that are hard to explain. This is a main part of learning poetry language, seeing how poets make hard ideas easy to understand and relate to. This brings us to how poetry helps you figure out hard ideas. Many poems aren't just about simple feelings, they explore big questions about life, love, loss, or people. And often, poets use picture words and poetic tools to share these complex thoughts. For instance, a poem might use the metaphor of a river to show the passing of time or the journey of life. It's not just a body of water, it's a symbol for something much bigger. By looking closely at how the poet describes the river, is it fast, slow, winding, or straight? You can understand the poet's view on time or life. This act of figuring out is a strong way to get better at understanding English. You start to look for the deeper meaning, the layers of thought that are under the surface words. This skill is very useful not just for reading poetry, but for understanding hard articles, talks, or even conversations. I remember when I was first learning English, I found a poem that talked about the city's hungry eyes. I was so confused. How could a city have eyes, let alone hungry ones? It sounded strange, almost scary, but as I read more, I realized the poet was using personification. The hungry eyes weren't real eyes. They were the windows of the buildings, always looking out, always wanting something. Maybe more people, more money, more life. The word hungry added a feeling of needing or wanting a lot to this picture of the city. It made me think about the city not just as buildings and streets, but as a living thing that wants things. This one phrase, the city's hungry eyes, taught me much more than a simple meaning of city or hungry. It showed me how poets can use language to give a place a personality and a feeling. It made me realize that English could be used not just to describe things, but to give them a life of their own. This experience really opened my eyes to how picture words work and how they can make writing much more powerful. It was a moment where I felt like I wasn't just learning English words, but learning to see with English words. This active working with poetry is very important. When you read a poem and try to figure out why the poet chose a certain metaphor or how a simile creates a specific effect, you are becoming an active reader. You're not just letting the words flow over you. You're thinking, asking questions, and looking closely. This process makes your thinking skills sharper. You begin to ask, what does this mean? Why did the poet say it this way? What feeling does this create? These are the same questions you need to ask when you are trying to understand a complex idea in an essay or a strong point in a speech. Learning poetry language, by its nature, trains you to be a more thoughtful and involved reader and thinker. You learn to look past what's obvious and to appreciate the skill that goes into creating meaning. Let's take another example. Think about the phrase "a sea of troubles." This is a metaphor. It doesn't mean there are real oceans full of problems. It means there are so many troubles, so many difficulties, that they feel as big and wide as a sea. If you are facing a sea of troubles, you feel completely surrounded and perhaps cannot get away. This metaphor helps us understand how big someone's problems are. It's much stronger than saying, "I have many problems." The sea picture makes the problems feel huge and like they cover everything. Learning this metaphor gives you a new, powerful way to describe overwhelming situations in your own English. You can now say, "I'm facing a sea of troubles with this project," and anyone who understands the metaphor will quickly know how big your difficulties are. This is the main idea of learning poetry language, gaining not just words, but the strong way to express things with language. Picture words also help us understand feelings more deeply. Poets often use metaphors, similes, and personification to describe feelings that are hard to put into words. For example, sadness might be described as a heavy cloak, happiness as a bursting balloon, or anger as a raging fire. These images give us a real way to understand feelings that are not physical. When a poet says, her heart sang with joy, you understand that her joy was so great it felt like a beautiful song. This is more moving than simply saying she was very happy. It connects the feeling to something you can sense, sound, and to a good, uplifting feeling. By studying these examples, you learn to connect certain kinds of images with specific feelings, which makes your ability to show your own feelings and understand the feelings of others in English better. The beauty of poetry language learning is that it makes these improvements feel natural and fun. Instead of memorizing lists of common phrases or trying hard to use new phrases, you see them in the middle of a story, a feeling, or a beautiful description. You see how they work, how they create meaning, and how they make the language come alive. This makes learning feel less like work and more like exploring. So, when you read a poem and find a phrase that makes you stop, ask yourself, is this the real meaning, or is the poet using picture words? Is this a metaphor? Personification? What picture is the poet trying to create? What feeling are they trying to share? By asking these questions, you are actively working with the poem and, at the same time, making your English skills sharper. You are learning new words, understanding how sentences are put together to create specific effects, and developing a sense for the rhythm and music of the English language. You are not just reading words on a page, you are having a conversation with the poet, a conversation that makes your understanding of both the poem and the amazing power of English grow. This journey of discovery, filled by the rich and varied tools of poetry language, is what makes learning English through poetry so effective and, I dare say, wonderfully fun. 4. Exploring themes in poems. When we read a poem, it can feel like looking at a nice picture. We see the colors and shapes, and we might know what the picture shows us right away. It could be a flower, a rough sea, or a person's face. But a really good picture, like a really good poem, has more. It has a deeper feeling, a hidden idea, a story that goes beyond what we see at first. This deeper idea, the main message the poem wants to share, is called its theme. Think of it this way. A poem might be about a dog. That's what it's about. But what is the poem saying about dogs? Is it saying dogs are loyal friends? Or that they bring happiness? Or maybe that a dog reminds us of simple joys? These are all possible themes. The theme is the main idea or message about life or people that the poet wants us to think about. It's the special understanding the poem gives us. Poems are like small worlds, and these worlds often have big, important ideas. They can talk about love, the kind that makes us happy or sometimes sad. They can talk about sadness, the quiet kind or the loud kind. Nature is a big theme too. The beauty of a forest, the power of the sea, the changing seasons. Poems often make us think about who we are and where we fit in the world. They can touch on how time passes quickly, or the big questions about why we are here. These are the themes that make poems strong. They speak to feelings and ideas that everyone shares, no matter where they are from or what language they speak. This is where our learning journey really shines. By understanding the themes in a poem, we get to the heart of why the poet wrote it. To get to that heart, we need to look closely at the words, the pictures the words make in our minds, and how the poem is put together. It's like being a detective looking for clues. These clues are the special language tools poets use. The themes in poems are usually not written out clearly, like a sign saying, "This poem is about X." Instead, poets hide their themes in the poem using carefully chosen words, strong pictures, and comparisons. That's why, to find the theme, we need to read closely, maybe more than once. We need to pay attention to the feelings the poem gives us, the pictures it creates in our minds, and the sound of its words. Let's imagine a poem about a small seed pushing through hard ground. The topic is a seed. But what is the theme? Is it about hope? About being brave? About life's strength to overcome problems? The poet might use words like struggle, push, strength, and sunlight to hint at this deeper message. The picture of the seed breaking through the earth is not just a pretty image, it's a symbol of something more. It shows us that even small things can be powerful, and that with effort, growth can happen. So, when we ask ourselves, what is this poem really about, beyond what we see at first? We are starting to look for the theme. We move from saying, it's about a seed, to exploring, it's about the power of new beginnings and the quiet strength that can be found in even the smallest things. This deeper understanding is very helpful for learning English, because once we understand the theme, we start to understand why the poet chose the words they did. We see how the poem's meaning and its language are connected. If the theme is about the sadness of losing something special, the poet might use words that sound soft and sad, or images of fading light or empty places. Understanding the theme helps us see why these language choices were made. It shows us that words are not just building blocks. They are also brushes that paint feelings and ideas. This way of connecting theme to language is the main part of poetic language learning. It's not just about learning new words. It's about understanding how words work together to create feeling and meaning. It's about seeing how the poetic devices we might have learned about, like metaphors, similes, or specific types of imagery, are not just fancy tricks, but important tools for showing complex human experiences and deep ideas. Think about a poem that talks about a river flowing. At first, it's just about water moving. But if the theme is about how time never stops, or about the journey of life, then every word describing the river's movement, its turns, its speed or slowness becomes a clue. The poet might use words like ever-flowing, never ceasing, or journeying to support this idea. By understanding the theme of time passing, we can better see why the poet chose those specific verbs and adjectives. We learn how language can be used to express big, abstract ideas in a way that feels real and moving. This is why reading actively is so important. It's not just sitting back. It's like having a conversation with the poem. And the theme is often the most important thing the poem has to say in that conversation. When we find a theme, we are not just understanding a poem, we are also getting better at understanding complex ideas in English. We are learning to look past what is obvious and find the deeper layers of meaning that make language so rich and expressive. Let me share a small story about my own experience with poetry and English. When I was younger, I found a poem by an old English poet. I can't recall the exact title now, but it was about a bird singing in the rain. At first, it just seemed like a simple description. A bird singing, rain falling. I thought, okay, that's nice. But I felt like I was missing something. The words felt more important than just a bird and rain. I kept reading it, and I started to notice how the poet described the bird's song. It wasn't just a happy song. It was called clear, resolute, and a challenge to the gray. The rain was not just wet. It was drenching, cold, and persistent. I started to wonder, why use such strong words? Was the poet just describing a sad day? Then I understood. The poem wasn't just about a bird and rain. The birds singing so bravely in the bad weather was a symbol. The theme was about finding hope and beauty even in difficult times. The bird's song was a sign of inner strength, a refusal to be quieted by the storm. The poet was saying that even when things are hard and gloomy, there is still a part of us that can sing, that can find joy, that can keep going. And in that moment of understanding the theme, the poem's language suddenly made much more sense. I understood why the poet chose the word resolute for the song. It showed the bird's determination. I understood the meaning of challenge to the gray. It was a bold statement against the sadness of the rain. I learned that words like resolute and persistent could be used not just to describe things, but to describe an inner quality, a spirit. This was a big step for me in learning English. I didn't just learn new words. I learned how those words could carry deep emotional meaning and express complex human experiences. It felt like unlocking a secret door to the language. So, how do we, as readers, find these important themes? What specific words, images, or phrases in a poem help us understand its main message? It's like being a detective, as I said. First, we look at the words. Are there words that are used more than once? Repeating words often shows they are important. If a poem keeps mentioning light, sun, or shine, the theme might be about hope, knowledge, or happiness. If it uses words like dark, shadow, or night, it might be about sadness, mystery, or the unknown. Are there words that create strong feelings? Words like joy, sorrow, fear, or love are direct clues to the poem's emotional tone, and themes are often connected to these emotions. Second, we look at the images. What pictures do the words create in our minds? A poem might describe a flower that is dying. This image could suggest themes of getting older, loss, or how beauty doesn't last forever. Or it might describe an eagle flying high. This image could point to themes of freedom, ambition, or seeing things from a higher point of view. Poets use images to make big ideas feel real and easy to understand. The image of a dying flower is a concrete way to talk about the big idea that things eventually end. Third, we look at comparisons. Poets often compare one thing to another to help us understand it better. They might say something is like something else, a simile, or say something is something else, a metaphor. For example, if a poem compares a hard life to a stormy sea, the theme might be about getting through hardship, dealing with challenges, or how life can be unpredictable. We need to ask, what is being compared to what, and what does this comparison tell us about the poet's message? Let's try to use this on a very simple idea. Imagine a poem that talks about a house. Is the poem just about a building? Or is it about something more? If the poem uses words like warmth, shelter, family, and safety, then the theme is likely about the meaning of home, not just a physical place, but a feeling of belonging and security. The house becomes a symbol for these deeper ideas. Or think about a poem that describes a journey. Is it just about walking from one place to another? If the poem talks about new paths, uncertain roads, discoveries, and finding oneself, then the theme is probably about personal growth, adventure, or the process of discovering who you are. The journey is a symbol for life's experiences. These questions, what is this poem really about, beyond what we see at first? And what specific words, images, or phrases in the poem help you understand its main message or theme? Are your tools? They help you look deeper. They encourage you to connect the poet's language choices with the poem's main meaning. By actively engaging with themes, we do more than just understand a poem. We are practicing a way of reading deeply that is very helpful for becoming good at English. We learn to notice the subtle ways language can express complex ideas. We become more aware of how words and phrases affect our feelings. We start to understand how poets build meaning, and this understanding helps us understand and use English better. This method of exploring themes is a key part of poetic language learning. It makes learning feel less like work and more like an adventure. It's about finding the hidden treasures in poems, and by doing so, finding new depths in our own understanding of English. Once we have found the powerful themes hidden in a poem, we can then appreciate how the poet's careful choices in language, the very tools we've been discussing, are essential in bringing those themes to life. In the next section, we will look more closely at these specific poetic devices and see exactly how they convey meaning and improve our understanding of English. Conclusion: we have come to the end of our adventure together. Thank you for walking with me on this lovely trip. We found something truly special, that poems are not just for old books or special times. They are a lively, strong tool, a hidden garden that can help you grow your English skills. We started with a simple thought, that learning poems could be a fun and good way to get better at English. This book showed you how this magic works, using what we called learning English with poems. Think of learning English with poems as your own, exciting way to get great at English. It means you will really work with poems, not just read them, but truly feel the words they have. It means understanding the smart ways poets use words to make you feel things, to show you pictures in your mind and to share big thoughts. This way of learning feels less like work and more like an exciting quest. We saw how poems use special word tricks, like when one thing is shown as another, or when two different things are compared to help you understand. We looked at how the beat of words and how lines are put together can make language sound beautiful. By knowing these poem tricks, you are not just liking art, you are learning how English works in a way that you will remember. But poems give you more than just smart word games. Poems often talk about what it is like to be a person, our happy times, our sad times, our hopes, and our dreams. Thinking about these deep ideas helps you understand English in a new way. You learn new words for feelings and thoughts, and you start to see the small differences in meaning that make language so rich. This active way of looking closely at a poem, feeling its beat, and understanding its message is the heart of learning English with poems. It changes you from someone who knows English words to someone who truly uses and feels the language. So, what does this mean for your English? Your ability to read and understand will be much stronger. When you learn to look closely at a poem for its hidden meaning, you are practicing the same skills you need to understand any text. Your words will also grow. Poems show you words used in beautiful and surprising ways, making your word list bigger and showing you how to use words more exactly. And your writing? It will likely become more full of feeling and interesting. Seeing how poets build sentences and create pictures can give you ideas for your own words, making you feel more sure to share your thoughts. You will start to see the beauty and power of English in a way you might not have before. This book was a start, a gentle invitation. The ideas of learning English with poems are now yours to use whenever you want. Do not stop here. The world of poems is huge, with voices from the past and present, all waiting to share their language with you. Your journey to better English through poems has just begun. Pick up a poem that you like. Maybe words from a song, a short verse, or something from a book. Try reading it out loud to hear its music. Look for the interesting words and the comparisons poets make. Do not worry if you do not understand everything right away. The exploring itself is where you learn. Most of all, remember to enjoy this. Poems can make learning English a happy discovery, not a hard job. So, go on with trust. Let the beat of poems lead your learning, let the deep ideas open your mind, and let the beauty of language make your life better. You have the key. Now, unlock your best English, one poem at a time.